Well, the record is broken. Red Bull have reached 12 consecutive victories, and they did it in comfortable style, didn't they? Max Verstappen winning the Hungarian Grand Prix by 33, nearly 34 seconds this afternoon. Welcome back to the show. My name is Aaron. This is AHGP, and we're going to react to a somewhat dull Hungarian Grand Prix. Not the sort of Hungarian Grand Prix we hoped to have, considering the grid that we were left with after yesterday's qualifying session. Let's start with Red Bull, I suppose, because they've made a bit of history, and whether you like them or not, I mean, I'm not a particularly big fan. If you're watching on video on YouTube, you can see I'm wearing a Mercedes shirt, so that shows you where my loyalties lie, and also the stuff that's over here behind me. So none of it's a Red Bull stuff. So I'm not their biggest fan, but you have to appreciate the excellence that they've delivered. And it's all, I say it's down to one man. Adrian Newey has pioneered this machine with these ground effect rules and just left everybody else for dust. But it's not just him, of course. There are other people, so many other people involved in creating a racing car. And then you need someone to pedal it. And they've got Max Verstappen, who, again, like him or loathe him, is just delivering at an extraordinarily high level. And sportsmen and sportswomen will look across to people who are performing at high levels, and they will see what he's doing. They'll understand the effort that is put into that. And of course, there was no need for him to be involved in any shenanigans this time, was there? Because of course, last weekend he was disqualified from an esports race because he smashed someone off the road because he didn't like the way that they bumped into him. It was him getting up the inside this time into a hairpin, though, and making the move into turn one. And once he was there, it was a foregone conclusion. It was just tick off the minutes and the laps and hope that he doesn't break down, if you're a Red Bull fan, I suppose, because the car is just so dominant. And, you know, it does kill the fun. And when you've got Perez in the other car sort of botching it every other week, there's no tension sort of competitively. If Verstappen was being pushed, and this is why I would like to see Ricciardo put in the car for next year, I think Ricciardo would keep Verstappen a bit more honest than Perez has this year. Verstappen knows he has Perez covered, end of story. But he still has to deliver the race. And, you know, Hungary's a circuit where you could make a mistake and you can be punished. If you get on the marbles, if you make a mistake on lapping or lapping somebody, I mean, backmarkers do strange things. He can just ask his dad about being a backmarker and crashing into the race leader in Brazil 2001. Well, there was a error there with OBS where the camera seemed to stop working. I was frozen for a second, but we're back now. So, as I was saying, yeah, Jos Verstappen took out Juan Pablo Montoya, who was leading the 2001 Brazilian Grand Prix. So, yeah, it can be treacherous if you're leading the race. There are lots of things that can go wrong. And then everybody else behind benefits. There's nothing that you can benefit from anybody else's problems. So, unless the guy's right behind you and they fall off the road or something. But for Verstappen, again, just another very comfortable victory in the end. It is just a question of, well, there are two questions. First one is, when's it going to end? And, well, I suppose the flip side of it is, how many is he going to rack up in a row? Because that's 7 in a row just for Verstappen now, which is something last achieved by Nico Rosberg in the back end of 2015 and the start of 2016. And, well, I suppose the answer is you're going to need a freak random event, first of all, to stop Verstappen winning, because I don't think Perez has got the game at the moment to get anywhere near him. And you're going to need something to thwart both Red Bulls, because if Perez can get himself back up to the level that he showed at the early part of the season, Red Bull are going to be very difficult to stop winning every race with either car. So it's looking worrying for everybody else. And I think if Red Bull do go and win every race this season, it would be embarrassing for everybody else, because it would just show that they've not done a good enough job. And essentially, you've got big teams like McLaren and Mercedes and Ferrari who will have had their pants pulled down in the most embarrassing way in the competition that they're involved in. So for their sake, they need to get someone to win a race. So that's not a Red Bull. So we'll see how far it goes. There's still plenty of races left, of course, and in Formula One, anything can happen, and it usually does. Now, McLaren, one of those big teams that I mentioned, they're back on the podium for a second race in a row, and Lando Norris taking a consecutive podium for the second race running. First time he's done that in his career. Great drive from Lando. For me, driver of the day. He lost out at the start, but weirdly everyone on the left on the racing line lost out, and the guys on the inside, because they managed to get on the inside at turn one, managed to gain. So what impressed me was Lando's race management. He nailed the outlap on his first pit stop and got track position on his teammate, rightly or wrongly. But the team had to do something to protect from Hamilton, who'd boxed. But then his race pace was just superb from there. And even when Perez was hunting him down, he was never really that flustered. Okay, there was a bit of pressure on the radio, but you're driving at 170, 80 average speed miles an hour. If you're trying to do that, I'm not sure you're going to want people in your ear every other corner telling you what's going on. But just leave him to focus, I think, is one of those things. It was almost a bit like Kimi Räikkönen in 2012. The leave me alone, I know what I'm doing. But Lando, again, we know how good Lando is. And I say it every time he has a good result, but we should not be surprised that he's got a good car and he's able to pull out a performance like this. He could be the beneficiary of Red Bull coming a cropper. And to be fair, that would be the bit of karma that needs to come back to Lando Norris after what happened in Sochi in 2021. Whatever your feelings are, he was probably the deserving winner of that race. So, maybe if he lucks into his first win, you can say that's a little bit of karma. And McLaren are really giving teams like Aston Martin and Ferrari a proper headache now, because if I have a look at the team's standings at the end of this race, hopefully the website is updated. I think it has. So McLaren are now on 87 points, as my door is now opening with the wind. And they are now 80 points behind Ferrari. And Ferrari finished 7th and 8th today because, well, they're Ferrari and they just get everything wrong. Leclerc got a penalty for speeding in the pit lane. Come on, Charles, you've got to be nailing everything. I'm one of his biggest advocates, but Ferrari are just shooting themselves in the foot. The drivers are making mistakes in consequence. And McLaren now outscoring Ferrari for a second race in a row, beating them with both cars. Piastri showing why he was so highly sought after by McLaren. They're in trouble, and Aston Martin even more so. Only 9th and 10th for them today. Alonso again very quiet. What happened to no more races without a podium, Fernando? I mean, come on, man. You've got to be dragging more out of the car than that. You're supposed to be Fernando Alonso, or has he, at the almost ripe old age of 42 now, finally gone over the hill in terms of speed and whatever? So who knows with Fernando Alonso? He'll probably win the next race, to be honest, now I've said that, but that's fine. And Mercedes potentially may have to look over their shoulders as well, even though they kind of matched McLaren, I'd suppose, because Hamilton finished 4th. It's a 6-point loss, but he finished ahead of Piastri, so really only a 4-point loss there, a few points lost because Russell finished in P6 because of Leclerc's penalty. So McLaren are putting themselves in the hunt. I don't think they'll catch Mercedes for P2. I'm not going to get that far in advance, but Mercedes have pulled away from Aston Martin. McLaren are coming up quick behind Ferrari and potentially even Aston Martin, because Aston Martin on 184, Ferrari 167 and McLaren 87. So yes, it's a 97-point gap to Aston Martin, but if you have a few more results like this to the end of the season, where McLaren are finishing on the podium and fourth and fifth, and then Aston Martin are finishing like 9th with one car and Stroll's out of the points or something, because let's be honest, he probably will be more often than not now, McLaren could really erode that gap. And from a car that had them bottom of the table after round one, if they finished fourth, considering the upgrades and the development of that car, that would show incredible progress. And it would fully justify the decision to let James Key go. And I think we're seeing the fruits of the Andrea Stella leadership now start to take hold. But then that shouldn't put a slight on Andreas Seidel, who did a really good job with the McLaren team. And talking of Mercedes, how on earth do you solve a problem like the W14? Well, you wait for next season and you build a better car. But we said that last year about the W13, and Lewis took a fantastic pole position, and Martin Brundle said on commentary it was a Lewis lap, and it truly was. Only Lewis Hamilton could have pulled a lap out like that. But the car, it's a bizarre car. The last two Mercedes have just been weird in the fact that they've had such odd issues. Like in certain tracks at certain phases of a race, they can be almost as quick as the Red Bull, if not faster. I mean, towards the end of the race, Hamilton was catching Perez at 9 a second a lap, which we haven't seen since like the 2014 season, really, when Red Bull had a Renault engine and it was rubbish. But there were phases of the race where the Mercedes was just dog slow. It was very, very odd, and Hamilton must be tearing his hair out because he knows he's still got the ability to take pole position. He's shown it. He could have won this race, potentially. Even if he got through turn one in the lead, I don't think he'd have had the speed to win this race today. But he knows in himself, and George Russell knows it in himself, race-winning driver level. Obviously, we know that because they are both race winners. But they could do so much more with this car if it worked more consistently. And let's move away from the front of the grid. Daniel Ricciardo is back on the grid. I mean, when they showed his garage, the AlphaTauri garage in qualifying, and the driver shot that they've got above the garage, he just looked like a guy who'd won a competition to drive a Formula One car. And that's not to say Daniel Ricciardo's no good, but the smile on his face in the photo, everyone knows the Daniel Ricciardo smile, and we love it. But it just, because he was back, it just looked like it was a competition winner. So it was brilliant. And to see him out qualify Tsunoda, I correctly predicted it. Well done, me. We'll go through my predictions shortly. But then he beat Tsunoda in the race. It was an odd strategy. He was at one point, he pitted and was last, and then I looked again and he was 13th and not far behind Albon and Bottas. So I can't explain it, but just brilliant from Daniel Ricciardo considering where that car's been the last few races. And conversely, Alfa Romeo, who had such a brilliant qualifying session, completely flopped in the race. My door is blowing open with the wind. You can't see or probably hear any of this if you're listening, but I'm just hoping it doesn't slam. Alfa Romeo completely flopped in the race. Zhou with a career best P5 in qualifying, only to forget to go anywhere at the start and just got swallowed. Then he triggered the accident that wiped out both Alpine's cars, and that's Alpine's hopes of P5 done. They are cooked this year, because barring a 1-2 and maybe another podium, I can't see Alpine just getting anywhere near McLaren. That's it. They're done. They're locked in 6th place for the rest of the season. Their season is done. They might as well start developing next year's car if they haven't already. Then just bin off all the developments for this year's car and just get on with it, lads. But Alfa Romeo, from 5th and 7th, they ended up 12th and 16th at the flag, which is such a shame because they were looking really, really strong. And for Zhou to be out qualifying Bottas again, I mean, that shows that the speed is there for Zhou Guanyu, and it gives them a real headache actually, because what do you do if Théo Pourchaire, who is a few points behind Fred Vesti in the F2 Championship. What if he wins the F2 Championship this year? Then what do Alfa Romeo do? Because he's in the Sauber Driver Academy. They've got Audi coming in 26. But Porsche is here and now, and he's ready. He could be doing a great job in a Formula One car. But Bottas is locked in for next season. Zhou, I think, is on a 1-year deal. He'll probably have to have it renewed at the end of the year. But he's matching Bottas. Like, in the driver's standings, I don't think that really shows the story. Bottas has 5 points. Well, actually, there you go. It does. Bottas has 5 and Zhou has 4. So it shows you exactly where Zhou's performance level has been. He's matching Bottas in a car that's a bit up and down, and he outqualified him on a weekend where the Alfa was really strong. They didn't get the points for it because the start, but you know, if he was to get dropped, it would be really unfortunate. But I don't know where he'd go. Would he go to Williams? There's not really a space there because they're probably going to keep Logan Sargent. Maybe Haas. There's rumours of Alfa Romeo taking their sponsorship to Haas, but I mean, who knows? It's weird, this Formula One malarkey, isn't it? So I'm going to wrap up my little ramble here. I'm going to open the doc off screen, and we're going to go through my predictions. So first of all, the 5 things that would definitely happen in the Hungarian Grand Prix. Number 1, McLaren double points. Well, they got a podium and a P5, so that was good. Hamilton podium, no. Very close though, but that one didn't quite work out. Ricciardo outqualified Tsunoda, so that's 2 out of 3. Ferrari in the top 3 in qualifying, no. They were, where were they? They were 11th and 6th, I think. Yeah, they were very not top 3. And Sergio Perez would make Q3, so that is 3 out of 5. I'd call that a decent return. Not quite the 5 out of 5 from the British Grand Prix and a few other occasions. And then my proper race predictions. Verstappen pole. I mean, I kind of expected him to be on pole, but I was delighted when Lewis Hamilton took pole. Pure joy. Leaping around like a child. But it wasn't to be in terms of Hamilton winning the race. So I went Verstappen to win. He won the race. It's just, predict Verstappen to win. You'll probably be right. Hamilton second. That didn't work out. It was a British driver in second though. Of course, Lando Norris. And then Sergio Perez in third. And he did finish third, having started 9th. So before I leave you, I'm just going to rate the race very quickly. And I want you to send me a tweet or a thread or something on social media. Reply in the comments on the YouTube video with your race rating. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10, which may be a touch generous. But there were some interesting stories within the race in terms of the McLaren's progress and George Russell coming through and Ferrari just being Ferrari. Let me know what you thought of the race. Rate it out of 10. And that'll do for today. You can follow me on Threads, Aaron Harper 22, on Twitter, Aaron Harper 41, or AHGP Pod, on Instagram, Aaron Harper 22. There's so many social media places now, isn't there? It's ridiculous. What else do you need to follow? You need to go and watch Pad versus Wheel, where I take on Grid Talk host Ruby Price. I use a pad, she uses a wheel on the F123 game, and we're driving the Haas cars. And we've just recorded Baku, but you can watch the first 3 rounds on the channel now. I'll leave a link to it in the down below. Well, it'll be on the end thing. You'll find it. And you can find more from me on the Grid Talk podcast, on the F2 show. You can find more of my writing on Inside F2 and F1Chronicle.com. That's wherever you can find me. So I will see you next week for a look back at the Belgian Grand Prix. And until then, it is goodbye.